The silence in our colonial-style home in Greenwich, Connecticut, used to feel like peace. It was the kind of quiet you pay for, the kind that comes with triple-pane windows, a gated driveway, and a half-acre of manicured lawn separating you from the neighbors. But lately, that silence has started to feel like a holding breath. My name is Elias Thorne. I'm a man who believes in the weight of things, the weight of a wrench in your hand, the weight of a promise, and the weight of a secret. I built Thorne Restoration from the ground up. I started with a rusted-out Ford Econoline and a set of gauges I bought at a pawn shop in a dusty corner of Ohio. Today, I oversee the climate control for some of the most sensitive historic buildings in the Northeast. And I'm not a suit, but I've got more common sense in my callous thumb than most of the guys at the local country club have in their entire family trees. I make a solid six-figure living, I pay my taxes, and I've never missed a mortgage payment. Or so I thought until a Tuesday afternoon in late May. I was looking for a spare set of keys in Sarah's jewelry drawer, the heavy mahogany one her parents gave us as a proper wedding gift. Tucked beneath a silk scarf, I found it, an ivory envelope. The paper was so thick it felt like leather, embossed with the Sterling family crest. It was the invitation to her sister Clara's wedding, the social event that the local papers had been whispering about for months. I opened it, expecting to see my name. Instead, I saw an erasure. The Sterling family requests the honor of your presence. Ink Sarah Sterling, just Sarah, no and guest, no Mr. and Mrs. Elias Thorne. In the eyes of Harrison and Margaret Sterling, I wasn't a husband. I was a clerical error they were finally correcting. Before we go deeper into this story, take a second and hit that subscribe button. Give this video a like and let us know where you're watching from. I'm curious to know how far these stories travel. To understand why that envelope felt like a punch to the solar plexus, you have to understand the shadow I've been living in for 5 years. That shadow has a name, Julian Vance. Julian wasn't just Sarah's high school sweetheart. He was the Sterling family's chosen one. He's the son of a federal judge, a maritime lawyer with a jawline that looks like it was designed by a committee, and a man who spent his childhood summering with Sarah in the Hamptons. When Sarah and I got married, her mother, Margaret, didn't offer a toast. She offered a condolence to the bridesmaids, whispering about how Sarah was going through a phase of rebellion and how she'd eventually come home to her senses. I've spent half a decade sitting through dinners where Harrison would ask me to explain how the common man views the economy, as if I were a different species. I've watched Julian show up to family fundraisers and be treated like the prodigal son while I was asked to move my truck because it ruined the aesthetic of the driveway. I took it all. I swallowed my pride because I loved Sarah. I thought she was the bridge between my world of sweat and steel and her world of silver spoons. But looking at that invitation, I realized the bridge had been pulled up, and I was standing on the wrong side of the river. I didn't confront her immediately. I wanted to see how far the deception went. Over the next few days, I became a ghost in my own home. I watched Sarah coordinate her weekend getaway with the precision of a military operation. She bought a dress from a boutique in Manhattan, a floor-length navy silk piece that cost more than the transmission I just replaced in my lead truck. When I asked her what she was shopping for, she didn't even blink. "Oh, just a little something for the spa weekend with Clara," she said, her voice light and airy. "You know how she gets before a big event. She needs her big sister to help her decompress." I watched her pack. I watched her hide the save-the-date cards in her work bag. I watched the woman I shared a bed with manufacture a reality where I didn't exist. The betrayal wasn't just the exclusion from the wedding, it was the sheer, practiced ease of her lying. She would kiss me goodbye in the morning, taste like the coffee I brewed for her, and then go spend her lunch break discussing seating charts that didn't include me. I started to wonder, if she could lie about this, what else was a fabrication? Every smile, every "I love you," every plan for our future started to feel like a script she was reading until she could find a better role. The days leading up to the wedding were the longest of my life. I went to work, I managed my crews, I climbed through crawl spaces and balanced industrial chillers, but my mind was in that jewelry drawer. I started doing some digging of my own. As a contractor for high-end resorts, I have access to certain databases in industry circles. I looked up the Sterling Beaumont wedding filing at the Grand Ainsley Resort. The Beaumonts, the groom's family, were old-school New York money. Real estate, shipping, the works. The Sterlings were trying to match them, but the math didn't add up. Harrison Sterling's boutique investment firm had been quiet lately. Too quiet. I pulled some public records on their Greenwich estate and found a series of notice of default filings that had been narrowly averted at the last minute. Harrison wasn't just a snob. He was a snob who was drowning. He needed this wedding. He needed the merger of these two families to maintain the illusion of his own solvency. And a son-in-law who wore work boots and talked about HVAC schematics didn't fit the brochure for a family that was supposed to be thriving. The night before she was set to leave, the air in our kitchen was thick with the scent of roasted chicken and betrayal. Sarah was humming a song, her suitcase already waiting by the door. I placed the ivory invitation on the granite island, right next to her wine glass. The humming stopped. The silence that followed was so heavy I could hear the hum of the refrigerator. "Elias, I can explain," she whispered, her eyes darting toward the door. "Explain which part, Sarah? The part where your parents banned your husband from the family wedding? Or the part where you agreed to it?" "It's not like that. My father, he said the guest list was strictly for legacy friends and family. He said having you there would cause unnecessary friction because of how Julian's family is still so close to ours. Julian is the best man's brother, Elias. It would be awkward." "Awkward for who?" "For me, because I'd have to see the man your mother wishes you married. Or awkward for you, because you're ashamed of the man you actually did." She grew defensive, her guilt turning into a sharp, ugly anger. "Look, Elias, you don't understand that world. You don't know how to talk to these people. You talk about pressure seals and labor costs while they talk about venture capital and international law. You are a downgrade in their eyes, and honestly, sometimes you make it so hard to defend you when you show up to brunch in a flannel shirt and talk about your fleet like you're a trucking tycoon. My parents wanted a perfect weekend for Clara. Is it so much to ask that I have one weekend where I don't have to worry about you saying the wrong thing? If you were in my shoes, facing a situation where your own spouse called you a downgrade to your face, what would you do? Share your thoughts in the comments." I didn't yell. I didn't break anything. I just looked at her, the woman I had supported through 3 career changes, the woman whose medical bills I paid when she was sick, the woman I loved with everything I had. I saw a stranger. I realized then that she hadn't just married me. She had tried to rehabilitate me. And since I refused to stop being a blue-collar guy, she decided I was no longer fit for public display. What Sarah didn't know was that my company, Thorne Restoration, had just signed the largest contract in our history. At the Grand Ainsley Resort in the Berkshires, the very venue for Clara's wedding, had a catastrophic failure in their HVAC and humidity control systems in the north wing. The wing where the ballroom and the VIP suites were located. The manager, Mr. Henderson, was a man I'd done favors for in the past. He was desperate. They had a high society wedding coming up, and the ballroom was currently a humid 85 degrees. The wedding cake was at risk of structural failure. The $50,000 floral arrangements were wilting, and the bride's mother was threatening to burn the resort down. They were paying triple for an emergency weekend crew. I hadn't told Sarah because I wanted it to be a surprise. The profit from this job was going to be the down payment on the beach house in Maine she always talked about. Now that money was going to stay in my pocket. As Sarah left at 6 a.m., she gave me a guilty kiss on the cheek and told me she'd call when she got to the spa. I watched her Lexus pull out of the driveway, the sterling vanity plate glinting in the early sun. I waited exactly 10 minutes before I called my foreman, Miller. "Pack the high-end gear," I said. "And Miller, I'm joining the crew today. Wear the professional uniforms, the black ones with the silver embroidery. We're going to the Grand Ainsley. We have a cooling problem to solve and a few family secrets to heat up." I wasn't going there to beg for a seat. I was going there as the man who held the keys to the building's comfort. I spent the drive up into the Berkshires thinking about every time Harrison had looked through me. I thought about the time he invited Julian to their Christmas dinner and forgot to tell me the start time. This wasn't about a wedding anymore. This was about respect. The resort was sprawling, a monument to old wealth and stone masonry. I pulled up in my lead truck, the Thorne Restoration logo gleaming. As I walked through the service entrance, I saw the chaos. Florists, caterers, and planners were sweating through their shirts. The elite guests were starting to arrive, fanning themselves with their programs. I checked the thermostats. The ballroom was a swamp. Without my crew, the wedding would be a disaster. I saw Harrison Sterling in the lobby, yelling at the resort manager. He looked ridiculous, his expensive suit soaked with sweat at the armpits. I pulled my cap low and walked past him. He didn't even see me. To him, I was just another laborer. That was his first mistake. I spent 4 hours in the bowels of the building. I could have fixed the system in 20 minutes, but I took my time. I listened to the chatter over the resort radios. The Sterling party is complaining again. They're threatening to sue if the ballroom isn't at 68 degrees by the time the ceremony starts. I smiled. I held the remote sensor in my hand. I was the most powerful man at this wedding, and nobody even knew I was in the building. I watched the security feeds. I saw Sarah in the bridal suite, laughing with Clara. I saw Julian Vance walking around like he owned the place, flirting with the bridesmaids. Every time he touched Sarah's arm, I tightened a valve on the chiller. At 2 p.m., an hour before the ceremony, the manager came to the basement. "Elias, please. They're losing it up there. The Beaumonts are threatening to pull their deposit. I need to check the airflow in the ballroom personally," I said. "Standard procedure." I stripped off my work shirt. Underneath, I was wearing a tailored black dress shirt and slacks. I didn't look like a contractor. I looked like the man Sarah's parents feared I could be. I walked through the main doors of the ballroom, carrying a silver tablet and a laser thermometer. The room was packed. Before we continue, take a second and share your thoughts so far on this story below. I read every single one. I walked straight down the center aisle. The clicking of my boots on the marble floor drew every eye. I stopped right in front of the altar, where Harrison was standing with the groom. "Temperature is still hovering at 78, I said loudly, looking at my tablet. "It's going to be a long ceremony, Harrison. Might want to tell the guests to keep their jackets off." The look on Harrison's face was worth every cent I'd ever spent on my business. "You! What are you doing here? Get out!" "I'm the contractor, Harrison. The manager brought me in to save your daughter's wedding. But honestly, the system is older than your family's ego. It needs a manual override from someone who knows what they're doing, and I'm the only one here who does." Sarah stood up from the front row, her face white. "Elias, stop this. You're embarrassing me." "Embarrassing you, Sarah? I'm here working. You're the one who's here at a wedding you lied about. You told me you were at a spa." "Julian, I didn't know the spa allowed corporate lawyers to tag along." Julian stepped forward, trying to play the hero. "Look, Thorne, you're making a scene. This isn't your world. Go back to the basement and let the grown-ups have their day." I looked at him, then at the crowd. "Julian, last I checked, your father's firm is currently under investigation for the very venture capital fraud my company's auditor flagged last year during our due diligence for the resort group. Maybe you should be less worried about my world and more worried about your bail hearing." I looked at the resort manager. "The system is fixed. I just haven't turned the cooling units back on. It'll stay 80 degrees in here until I press this button." Harrison was trembling. "Turn it on, now." "I'll turn it on when my wife explains to this room why she told me her husband wasn't good enough to be here." "Or maybe, Harrison, you want to explain why you're using the Beaumont's wedding gift to pay off the second mortgage on your Greenwich house?" The room went silent. The Legacy family started whispering. The gold standard was tarnished. "Before we go deeper, I would love to hear your point of view. Tell me what part hit you the hardest in my story and share your thoughts in the comments." Sarah didn't speak. She couldn't. She just looked at the floor, the navy silk dress she bought for her spa weekend suddenly looking very out of place. "That's what I thought," I said. I reached out and pressed the button on the tablet. A blast of cold, crisp air hit the room instantly. "Enjoy the wedding. It's the last time any of you will see me. And Sarah, don't bother coming back to Greenwich. I've already moved my things out. Why? And the locks are being changed as we speak. You wanted to be a Sterling? Well, now you are. Good luck with the debt." I walked out of the Grand Ainsley and didn't look back. I drove 3 hours back to our home, but it didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a museum of a life I'd outgrown. I spent the evening packing her things, not out of malice, but out of a need for clean lines. I realized that being a downgrade wasn't about my job or my clothes. It was about their inability to see value in anything that wasn't a mirror of their own vanity. I sat on the porch, watching the stars over Connecticut, and for the first time in years I could breathe. The divorce was swift. Harrison tried to sue my company for intentional distress, but the resort manager stood by me, providing logs that showed I had worked 10 hours to save their event when no one else could. Julian Vance's family scandal hit the papers a month later, and the Sterling name took a massive hit by association. Sarah tried to call me, crying about how her parents had forced her hand. I told her the same thing I told the resort manager. Some things are just too broken to fix. I sold the Greenwich house and moved back to a place where people value the work you do. Today, I'm sitting on the deck of a new house, one I built with my own two hands. I'm with a woman who doesn't care about legacy or downgrades. She cares that I'm a man of my word. I learned that the only person who can define your value is you. If someone doesn't invite you to the table, build your own house. Revenge isn't always about winning. Sometimes, winning is just about refusing to lose yourself to people who never deserved you in the first place. Thank you so much for staying until the very end of this journey. This story is a reminder that you should never let anyone make you feel like an uninvited guest in your own life. If you enjoyed how things turned out for Elias, please hit that like button and subscribe to Family Secrets and Revenge for more stories of justice and personal growth. What would you have done if you found that invitation? Share your overall thoughts in the comments below. I can't wait to read them. Until next time.